stay on topic because there's so much to talk about in the world of sports, and specifically in the world of college football, which has consumed 98% of my brain for the last 14, 15 weeks, and probably longer than that. I don't mean to start the show being a downer, and I don't feel like I am being a downer. I do want to make sure I get this in, so I'm going to do it right off the top. If your dad is around, call him and tell him you love him and give him a hug. If you are a dad yourself, don't wait till the new year. Make a resolution to spend the time with your kids, to take them to a game, to play a game with them, to sit down and read the book that they love, to play the video game that they care about, whatever it is. Go be a good dad. A shout out to and condolences to Clayton Keller and his entire family. The Utah Mammoth captain unexpectedly on Thanksgiving weekend lost his father and decided to play through it. His teammates rallied around him, and you don't really care much about the win or the loss when you're just trying to get through the human element of it. The NHL, the teams that they played against, everyone did a really good job, as good a job as you could expect handling it. Clayton Keller talked to the media about it. I mean, just it's a reminder that sports are amazing and fun and a great little release and a good package for us to put all of our other passions into. But at the end of the day, what matters is the stuff that Clayton Keller talked about, he's playing in St. Louis, which was his home team growing up, and talked about watching games at that arena. Now he's skating on NHL ice. Talked about watching the games, sitting in his dad's lap, sitting in his grandpa's lap. Make a phone call today. Or just go out there and connect with your kid, connect with your brother, connect with your sister. Hopefully, if your dad's around, you have a good relationship with him. Don't take it for granted. And condolences to Clayton Keller and to his family. Man, that was really, really rough to see. And also, in the same token, very inspiring to see the way that he talked about it. The reason I'm giving you my public service announcement is because we're never guaranteed tomorrow, and Clayton Keller's dad unfortunately wasn't. And his son, who has a national platform because he's a star in the NHL, got to tell people, hey, my dad was a great dad. Do the thing necessary to make your kid say that about you, if you are a dad. All right, we'll move on. I'll do my best. Like I said, I'm going to try to stay on task and on topic. There's a lot going on in the college football coaching carousel world. The rumor mill is touching here in our own backyard in the home state. We'll get to the Kalani Sitake to Penn State discussion. Guess what? Kalani Sitake will not be coaching at Penn State University next year. If you're a Utah fan, don't get your hopes up for that. If you're a BYU fan, don't worry about that. Well, I'll have more thoughts on that, but I need to start the show with a little bit of a self-reprimand, and hopefully when I'm wagging the finger at myself, it doesn't count for any of you. Utah football finished the season 10-2. In the last 2 weeks especially, but really the last 3 weeks, we got real spoiled, and our expectations after in 2024, a disastrously bad Utah football season soured us on so many things and had people questioning the way that Kyle Whittingham communicates with the media and the way that the players are not put first, or they are put first, but the secretive nature of the injury report is ridiculous and all this. And we just were like poking holes in everything we believed about Utah football for a year. And I think some bridges were burned. I honestly do. And then this offseason, we watched as national publications really, I think, started talking about, hey, you know who's probably going to be good again? Utah. If they don't get bit by the injury bug, this Utah team is going to be pretty darn good. We think that this Devin Dampier kid who's transferring in from New Mexico could pick up a lot of the slack. Hey, this Jason Beck guy's had some success in previous stops, including at New Mexico. And look what they've got. They've got this all-world offensive line. They've got potential first-round draft picks anchoring that offensive line at the tackle spots. And they've got these defensive names that we know. Lander Barton is a name that we know, and those of us who were closer to the program and we're trying to tell the national people, hey, some of the names that you don't know are just as important. And for me, it was like Levani Damouni. Well, John Hall ended up being a bigger factor than Levani Damouni did. And I don't think any of us really thought that John Henry Daly was going to have the year that he did, but he had the year that a lot of us thought Logan Fauno might have. And none of us saw Jackson Benny coming, but he was a revelation. And we all knew Smith Stone was a good player, and we thought Scooby Davis was a good player. And so that optimism started to build, and we were like, okay, all right. And then what happened? Utah started to win football games. And even when they lost to Texas Tech, we looked at it and we said, gosh, you know what, though? If a couple of things break differently, and if they just do this instead of that, they can win even that game. And so our expectations build and build and build, and then, BYU game, crap. No, I don't even want to talk about it. But we look at it and we say, again, you should have won that game. And we're measuring all this against the landscape, the backdrop of 2024, and we're just like, man, you were getting boat raced in a lot of those games. And this Utah football team, even in the 2 losses, looked like a pretty darn good football team. And in the wins, don't even get me started on the wins, you're smashing people. You got a top 10 scoring offense. You got a top 10 scoring defense. And what happens? All of us look at this team and we say, you know what? We can expect you to be great. We can expect you to be dominant. We can expect you to be in a conference championship game that, by the way, those losses really made it difficult for you to work your way back into. And we expect that the dominoes are going to fall in the right direction for you to be in the conversation in this college football playoff. And guess what? It didn't happen. And because we got spoiled, all of us, these last 2 weeks especially, watching 500-plus yards on the ground, 500-plus yards of total offense, and even the blowout win in the week previous to that 2-game, I don't want to call it skid, but even when you played against Baylor, you gave up way too many yards to Baylor, but you smashed them 55-28, right? You finished the year 5-0, Utah football fans. You finished the year 10-2. Even in the games that your defense didn't play its best. And even when you are not at your best, if you can find a way to win, that is a mark of a team you should be proud of. That is a mark of a good team. That is a mark of a strong coaching performance, even if it's only on one side of the ball. That is the mark of the Utah football culture that we worried about being fully, totally, and 100% intact under Kyle Whittingham and what I think were his very last games as the head coach of the University of Utah. And I was with you on Friday. I was just as spoiled and just as critical, probably more so. And then the previous Saturday against Kansas State, I was like, oh, my gosh. You know what? I'm not even going to hate on you that walked out of the Rice-Eccles Stadium if it wasn't my job to be there and to be in the post-game press conference, and if I wasn't looking for certain clues in the stands and on the field and in the post-game to tell me whether or not my intuition about Kyle Whittingham was correct or not. I probably would have, if I was just there as a fan, I might have got frustrated and got up and walked out. But the point that really needs to stand here, and the thing that we need to focus on, is that this Utah football team is 10-2. And if I go back to August and I tell you, hey, Utah's going to finish 10-2, you will take that every day of the week, twice on Sunday, and you will say, you know what, that's probably a team that's in the conference championship game. That's what we all thought. I'll look it up at some point during the show today. I asked the win total question in a poll, and 10-2, most people thought 9-3. 10-2 is better than a lot of us expected. Now, the pain point comes with the fact that your losses are to Texas Tech, who right now is the class of the conference and is probably going to get a first-round bye in the college football playoff, and, of course, to your in-state rival, who you hate to see having caught up with you. But a better question to ask this year was, are you going to be able to keep pace with BYU? because BYU had a great season last year. In fact, last year they had the season that you are having. They finished 10-2, and they're out of the conference championship picture. They're out of the college football playoff picture, and they're just like, man, how should we feel about a 10-2 football season? Now, they finished strong with a big bowl win over a Colorado team that was one of the most talked about squads in the country. Utah's probably not going to have that opportunity, but I am reprimanding myself for being overly spoiled these last 3-4 weeks, and especially these last 2 weeks, to not be happy that this Utah football team won games that, by the way, in 19 of the 21 years that Kyle Whittingham has been the coach, you don't overcome a bad defensive performance. You don't overcome a defensive slump, especially a 3-week-long defensive slump. You go back to just pull any random year out of the hat that's not 2008 and is not 2021. Pull them out. Give me a year. 2017, you give up 500 yards in a game, you're losing that game. You don't have the offensive firepower to overcome it. Give me another year. 2011, all right, sure. You give up 500 yards rushing in a game in 2011, you're losing that game. Let's do a better year. 2018 might have been the most talented roster that Utah football's ever had. You give up 500 yards rushing in a game in that season, your offense doesn't have the teeth to overcome that. This Utah football team is something that we should be celebrating right now, because all of us for 2 decades have been scratching our heads and wondering if it's possible that you can have a balanced team where the defense doesn't have to win you the games every single week, where the offense can make up for whatever the mistakes on defense are. Oh, and by the way, it's probably not even fair to take credit away from the defense in this Kansas game, because while they gave up a lot of yards, an uncomfortable amount of yards to Kansas, 290 on the ground, 187 through the air, they intercepted Jalen Daniels 3 times, and that was the difference in the game, including a pick 6 that really salted the game away. So the Kansas State game, we can criticize the defense. The Kansas game, you can kind of criticize the defense, but you gave up 21 points, which is that's a winning effort. And yeah, the yardage is, but that's how spoiled we are as a Utah football fan base. This team is 10-2, and I am with you in lamenting that 10-2 doesn't have as much weight to it as we would have expected. That 10-2 doesn't carry with it a trip to a college football playoff. 3 weeks ago, I thought that 10-2 was going to. But things did not work out your way. The upsets that you needed to happen didn't come to fruition. The style points that we thought this team was capable of putting up, didn't play out that way. The teams behind you that you needed to stay behind you by not putting together impressive victories, they didn't want to stay behind you. Vanderbilt is a big pain in your ass if you're a Utah football fan, because despite finishing 10-2 and despite winning every game these last 5 weeks, excuse me, I think Utah's going to fall in the rankings again. But I am not going to deride this team for having some shaky efforts on one side of the ball and still finding ways to win. Finding ways to win is what good teams do. And by the way, Texas A&M wasn't punished for needing to come back against a bad South Carolina team. I mean, there's some bias and some optics here that only apply to a Big 12 team, only apply to Utah, that wouldn't apply to some of these other teams in the country. But that's not the main point. The main point, let's focus on it. The main point is that Utah football, after a year that threatened the very existence of the foundation that had been built, is back. 10-2 is a great college football season. Is it one of Utah's best ever seasons? No. But is it a great college football season? Absolutely it is. And I'm bothered that we feel like we can't enjoy it, that we feel like we can't be happy about it because, it's not a conference championship, so that's not enough. And the bar has been raised to where we expect Power 4 conference championships every year. You're right. You pay the price of the ticket, you buy the gear, you're allowed to have those expectations. But coming up just short of those expectations does not mean it's a bad year. And the restoration of my confidence that this program is headed in a direction we can all be comfortable with happened over the course of these last 12 games. And, yeah, even these last 2 games where you're looking at it and going, what is wrong with this defense? Why are guys freezing their feet when they tackle? Why are they missing so many of these tackles? How is an inside power play tearing us up for 300 and 400 and 500 yards? How is Kansas able to do the same thing that Kansas State was? Well, guess what? You found ways to win. Go back to December 1st, 2024. And if you can, remember the feeling and tell me that 10 wins is not a great season, that 10 wins is not exactly what you want. Now, you should have beat BYU. And I think Kyle Whittingham's going to announce this week that he's done. And I think that one of the things that's going to nag at him in making that decision, and one of the things that's going to bother him in making that decision, is not only that he lost his last game against BYU, but that he lost the last game against BYU. Decisions that the coaching staff made. If a player drops a ball in a game-deciding touchdown scenario, or if like you saw in the Iron Bowl, if a player fumbles the ball away as you're driving in for a game-tying score or something like that, that's an execution error, right? I told you immediately after the hierarchy of blame that sits there. I think that's the thing that's going to, maybe I can come back for another year and can get one more against BYU. But look, 10-2 is a great season. And watching all that's happening in the college football world right now, we should all, coming out of Thanksgiving weekend, where I know you're thankful and you got to gather with your family and your friends and whoever else, we should be thankful thankful for the consistency that has existed in this college football world at the University of Utah for 2+ decades now. And that consistency, barring any surprises, will be maintained as much as it can be maintained through a potential coach's retirement. And I say potential coach's retirement, I am 99.9999 repeating out to infinity % confident that it's happening, and it's happening now. But, again, until we actually hear the announcement and see the press release and I get an official junk mail from the Utah football program, it's not in the books. You saw me tweeting, hopefully you saw me tweeting at Real OC Sports on the weekend. And I'm kind of hoping for a poetic end. I'm kind of hoping that the bowl game, and I think it looks like probably the Vegas Bowl, that the bowl game is conducted under co-head coaches, the same way that Kyle Whittingham began his tenure at the University of Utah as co-head coach during the Fiesta Bowl with a departing Urban Meyer. How apropos would it be then if he passed the torch standing on the sideline beside the guy who's taking over for him, who, by the way, played for him and was a captain on that team in the Fiesta Bowl? I mean, if that's not a storybook ending or as close to a storybook ending as you need, that's all you can get. Would it be more storybook if you were undefeated? Yep. More storybook if you were going out with a win over BYU and you were headed to the conference championship? Yes. Would it have been more storybook if BYU Utah was played in its proper place during the season at the end of the year in rivalry weekend? Yes. That would have been better. but I found myself watching the game on Friday, especially in that first half, complaining and whining. And what is wrong with these guys? And what happened? They found a way to win. At the end of this game, a 21-point fourth quarter for Utah means they finished the season 10-2. They're going to should be a top 15 team in the final rankings that matter, which unfortunately the rankings that come out after the real final rankings, the rankings that come out after the bowl games are not exactly indications of how good a team is all year, because bowl games are going to be conducted potentially under new coaches, potentially conducted with new rosters, et cetera, et cetera. So the reprimand I'm giving to myself is on Friday, as I'm gorging myself on leftovers and way too much turkey and apple pie and that sweet potato casserole that is just a pie by itself, not acknowledging how incredible this turnaround has been in 2025. If you want to be mad about a couple things, you're entitled to that. 877-353-0700. Tell me what they are. I really debated Saturday and Sunday whether or not I needed to come on and say, oh, my gosh, this defense, or if I needed to come on and talk about how I really felt and be accused of being a homer and be accused of having crimson-tinted glasses on. I was among those last year who was terrified that Utah football had lost its magic, that the stuff that made Utah football a program you could root for and be proud of on such a regular basis, I was worried it was leaving the program. When Cam Calhoun bails out post-spring ball and Zach Williams does the same thing, I'm like, man, that wouldn't have happened in the past. That wouldn't have happened under the Kyle Whittingham football team that I know. All those losses we saw last year and the weird distrust that developed between fans, players, media, coaches, all that doesn't make sense. Guys, this year, it all came back together. You know how hard it is to rebuild something that you watch get smashed with a hammer over the course of 18 months? They did it. No, it's not going to come with a Utah championship this year. No, it's not going to come with a college football playoff invite. But they rebuilt the program back to the standard that we expect. And unfortunately, a couple of balls don't bounce your way, and a couple of things happen in a way that they shouldn't, and a couple of plays aren't made that should have been made. But Utah football is back at 10-2, top 15 team at the end of the year in the country. To expect more than that is to get a little bit greedy, especially coming off a losing season. Tell me your thoughts. 877-353-0700. Say hello to James Peterson. He's producing today, James. Am I up in the night here? Is this how we should feel? Should I be more critical? Because, look, we all have to pay the big prices, and the program's got to pay the big prices, and you know, you've won championships before, so that's the new bar that has been set. Am I letting the Utes off the hook here by celebrating 10-2 instead of coming on and being like, well, you could have been in the playoff if you would have scored 55 points in the last two games?
I think it's fair to be critical if that's how you're feeling, because I think it's absolutely fair at this point for Utah fans and for people within the program to have high expectations. And at some point, you do need to graduate from, hey, it was just great that they played hard and that they won more games than we expected them to.
We're not
doing that. I know you're not. I'm not subtweeting you by saying that. I'm just saying there has been years pre-Pac-12 championships where it was like where you had generations of Utah football fans that are like, man, like we couldn't even go to a bowl game. A lot of years, right? And that was a fantastic season when we'd make a bowl game, right? Pre-Ron McBride or in the early Ron McBride years, right? So Utah's certainly graduated past that, and anyone who's still holding on to that, you got to be a little more critical of your team. But so that's why I say expectations are, and then winning 2 Pac-12 championships back to back, the expectations get ratcheted up even more. I think it's absolutely fair to feel that way. So if anyone is feeling like extra critical of this team, even though they did go 10-2, and they did until the last week of the season, they were in the college football playoff and the Big 12 championship conversation, which is a fantastic year. If you're still feeling overly critical of that, I think it's fair to feel that way. I'm more like you though, OC, where it's like, hey, you just won 13 games over a 2-season period. And as you mentioned, last fall in November, especially after the BYU loss, we were wondering on this show, a lot of people in the fan base were wondering, and I think there was probably people internally wondering if this program can continue to be as good as they were in the Pac-12 era going forward in this new NIL era.
I mean, look, that question still hangs over the program, and it should, but
not near as much, though.
It would be answered already if you had a 5, 6, 7, even an 8-win season. I would make an argument for Utah this year where you're just kind of hanging on by your fingernails. I think that a lot of people would be like, oh, that's tough. Now, college football, life comes at you fast, so that would be an overreaction. But if Utah had won 7 games this year, after going 5-7, then they get to a bowl. Hey, 7 games, good job, nice work. Wrong. Every good player is leaving the program, either to the draft or to the transfer portal. And more importantly, whatever coaching transition happens now comes with all of this like angst and all of this, wait, hold on a second. I don't know. Is this the right thing? Or, well, you know what? Let's stay on for one more year because I can't go out on that note either. And then you've got whatever the disagreement was late December, January that was happening. Now that's ratcheted up times 1,000, and maybe your succession plan doesn't come into place. It would have been catastrophic had Utah repeated what happened last year, had not been able to build back, had not been able to right what was wrong with the team last year. And they got luckier this year with injuries, significantly luckier, which is obviously important. But the more important thing here was that this team came together in a way that a lot of us didn't even expect, where the offense carried some things, which was refreshing to see, which is fun to see, and you got a 10-win season out of it. And 16-24 brings in something really interesting. Utah does not get to say they're back until they beat BYU. All right. I'm totally okay with that being your criteria. But that is the only criteria from a did we make it back season that they are not able to check the box. Every other thing no one is talking about, well, why'd you lose to Texas Tech? Why aren't you undefeated this year? Well, Texas Tech is the top 5 team in the country for a good reason. They look like it. They've been playing like it. At the end of the year, they might actually be that. We'll see. So if the criteria you missed is that you didn't beat BYU, yeah, that's a pain. That sucks. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that because you should have won that game. But that's the only box you don't check. I won't call it an exceptional season. I probably shouldn't even call it a great season. But 10-2 is one hell of a relief of a season for me.
I absolutely agree, and I think I remember in the summer I was saying I think they're going to get 8 or 9 wins this year. I didn't think they were going to be a double-digit win team. So the fact that they got to double digits in the regular season, OC, is significant for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. And is it the biggest deal? Is this a Pac-12 championship year? Is this a Sugar Bowl year, a Fiesta Bowl year? No, it's not. But it is a year that I myself will not be complaining about at all. And it is a year that justifies, should Kyle Whittingham make the decision I think he's going to make, it honors the tradition that he helped build, and it honors the legacy that he is supposed to be leaving at the University of Utah. 10 wins and right off into the it's not quite as beautiful of a sunset, but at least it's a sunset. All right, who we got on the show today? Scott Mitchell set to join us?
Ari Temkin next, Scott Mitchell at noon.
In fact, I rant for too long, so I'm late to Ari. Ari Temkin in 3 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show. It's ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Sean O'Connell Show continues here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We welcome in a Big 12 insider, host of Big 12 Today on TuneIn Radio, our friend Ari Temkin. Ari, welcome back to the show. How are you?
OC, how are you, man? I'm good.
I'm doing all right, man. I went on this roller coaster with the Utah football game on Friday against your Jayhawks. Did you experience that same roller coaster? Because it looked in the first half like Kansas was going to outplay Utah.
No, it did. In fact, I was thinking about our conversation last week during that first half, and then I wanted to get off the roller coaster in the second half. And Jalen Daniels played at Kansas for 6 years. It's incredible that he was able to do that. Play at one place for that long. And I mean, he was at Kansas at a point in time in which the program needed somebody to do what he did and help to lead them. But I think it's obvious that his best season was in 2022. He suffered injuries in 23 and was never the same, never really got better. And I think the second half of the game on Friday was a good example of that, where Daniels had a good season overall, but just made too many mistakes down the stretch of games that cost them. And the Utah game was so obvious, but there are other games like that throughout the year. I mean, his interception numbers were much less than what we're used to with him. But second half of that game obviously was he became unglued in his final game for Kansas. So, in some ways he'll be remembered for helping to be, with the program at its turnaround, and in other ways he'll be remembered for, playing at a high level, but really never, getting back to that same high level that he got at in 2022.
So, as an outsider looking in, how should Utah fans and the people who listen to my show feel about 10-2, but a 10-2 season that does not put you in the conference championship game, that does not put you in the college football playoff, probably doesn't even send you to the Alamo Bowl because they've never had USC and they're probably going to take USC instead? How should people be digesting this, do you think?
Yeah, it's the first time that Utah gets to 10 wins since 2019. And, in light of what happened last year, I think that this was a pretty successful season. Now, again, you'd figure that a 10-2 Utah team, should be a consideration for the college football playoff, and that doesn't look to be the case. So, you have to wonder what the Big 12 needs to do in order to get, a greater feeling in terms of the committee, because this felt like the type of year that would, shine within the committee's eyes, given you've got, you're more top heavy than you've been. I think it's clear that Utah and BYU and Texas Tech were above and beyond everybody else. I think the middle tier of the Big 12 was okay, but, it was more of a top-heavy league than what we're used to. And on the other side, the SEC is certainly getting the benefit of the doubt for being more of a league of parity. So in a way in which the SEC and the Big 12 have flip-flopped, the Big 12 doesn't seem to be getting the credit. So, I think, OC, to your point, like there's a level of disappointment here from Utah fans that feels like, why aren't we in better position here despite 10 wins in the regular season? And especially if this is the last time we see, Kyle Whittingham. I don't know why. For some reason, Whittingham and Dillingham just always gets me.
Yeah, well, it was even worse when Tyrone Willingham was coaching. So
that was a disaster. But no, this could very well, obviously, as you know, be the last time we see Kyle Whittingham on the sidelines for Utah. So I get a level of disappointment. I think from a conference perspective, I get it too, and the fact that you feel like if you've won 10 games and the only losses you have are to the top two best teams of the conference, that should mean something. And this is just a weird year. Duke is 7-5, and they're playing in the ACC championship game. If they win, then the ACC is not going to have an automatic bid. The automatic bid will most likely go to James Madison and to the American Athletic Conference champion winner, because the playoff stipulates it's the 5 highest-ranked conference champs. It has nothing to do with the Power Four or whatever else. And Duke is not going to be in that conversation. So in some ways, I think if you're a Big 12 fan, you've got to root for Duke to win that, because Miami then gets essentially the ACC's automatic bid, I would imagine, because Miami should be the playoff team out of the ACC. There's a chance that the ACC could get 2 if Virginia wins with Miami, and then who knows how the dust settles on the SEC. So, there's still a lot what seems like at play, but it certainly doesn't seem to be benefiting the Big 12, and we'll find out tomorrow. But, BYU probably has a bigger issue with the college football playoff more than Utah, obviously, because of that loss that Utah has to BYU, and BYU still being on the outside looking in.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, do you think BYU can beat Texas Tech now that is the matchup, and we found out Friday night that was going to be the matchup? BYU came out a little bit flat on Saturday, which is, I think, understandable. Texas Tech did not. They smashed West Virginia. Do you think that's going to be a competitive matchup?
Yeah, look, I expect it to be a lot more competitive than the first matchup between these two squads. I mean, I think, number one, Bachmeier's gotten better because he's more experienced and he's seen more from defenses. And look, I mean, I think, what's really interesting about this game is, how much worse is Texas Tech, especially on offense? Because I think that there's a chance that they could be. I mean, early on in that game, there's a couple of drives for Texas Tech where West Virginia really got after them, and it really slowed their offensive attack. And then Cameron Dickey got going, and that was kind of that. And then their passing game took off from there. But if you choke out the offense, if you're able to choke out the offense early, really by sniffing out the running game and then bringing some pressure, which is something I think Jay Hill is completely able to do, now you've got something going. Because I think, obviously, this is such a strong defensive football team. I mean, that is, for all intents and purposes, the strength of Texas Tech more than anything else. And so, for me, it's less about BYU being able to get scores and more about BYU being able to get stops, and then their stops dictating their offense, because Texas Tech just hasn't really played much from behind. And so, if you get them playing from behind a little bit, does that change the arithmetic for them offensively? So I think, to me, it starts with, can you make a little bit of hay on the offensive end against this defense? Can you make a little bit of hay with your defense against their offense, choke them out a little bit, and then get them reeling to where they're going outside their comfort zone? The biggest weaknesses right now of Texas Tech are in their red zone. They do not score touchdowns on as many drives as you'd like. Now, they do get to the red zone a ton, but I think the red zone touchdown percentage is one that, their offense just is not as good as it probably needs to be. So I think, again, that's right. I zero in on a strength of BYU, which is their defense getting after the passer, and then if they're able to do that, put the pressure on Texas Tech and kind of force them out of their comfort zone, does that open up some stuff for BYU offensively against this Texas Tech defense that so far has really been flawless?
Ari Temkin, our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking all things Big 12. So if that game ends up being another Texas Tech win, which I think most people expect it to be, that's when the conversation you alluded to earlier really comes into play, where, BYU could be potentially left out of the college football playoff, despite having the great season they've had. 2 losses to the same team. I mean, you could make an argument that if Texas Tech is a top 4, top 5 team in the country, BYU should not be excessively punished by having their only losses to them. They have a pretty great resume, quality wins all over the place. But in reality, let's live in a world that we think is actually going to come to pass. Do they get an invite to the college football playoff if they can't beat Texas Tech?
Yeah, I don't see it, and I'm not trying to justify it because it's unjustifiable. I think given the same scope of resume that they would be in. I mean, is Texas A&M going to get in despite them losing to Texas and not really having any positive wins? I mean, you look at Texas A&M and their schedule, they beat basically the bottom half of the SEC, and the best team they played, they lost in SEC play. So, yeah, I mean, I look at BYU's resume compared to Notre Dame, compared to Texas A&M, and it feels like if BYU had another brand and it was another name, that they would very much be considered even with a loss. But I think if you call a spade, that's what it is. Their brand, for whatever reason, is not enough to supersede, their resume. And I mean, look, there's a million ways to spin it, but that's it. I mean, if Notre Dame had the same resume, Notre Dame would be in. So why is BYU being punished then for no particular reason? So again, I'm calling a spade a spade. I don't agree with it. I think it's unjustifiable, but that's at least what we see so far from the committee. And look, I mean, the big thing is last time we saw the rankings released, 5 SEC teams were in. If that's the case, then you're looking at the potential for 2 ACC teams. Again, if Miami's going to get a bid and Virginia's going to get a bid, getting that automatic bid, you're starting to run out of spots. So it feels like there's a lot that can happen still this final week with Championship Saturday, which I don't know that 2 weeks ago looked like that was going to be the case. So I think, there's still a lot up in the air that there's a potential path here, but it just feels like there's far too many spots already earmarked for the SEC that would, undo the Big 12 getting a second bid. And this goes back to conversations we've had a ton, which is, the 2 automatic bids every year probably still put you in better position to get, on average, more than 2 over a 10-year period than the one automatic bid for the Big 12, because if there was ever a year where it felt like this was the year for the Big 12 to get multiple automatic bids or multiple bids to playoff in a situation which you're only guaranteed one automatic bid, this felt like the year, and yet they're going to fall flat. So, I mean, I don't know. I just don't know what BYU has to do. I mean, they've, aside from the obvious, which is beating Texas Tech, but I mean, they've won 22 games over the last 2 seasons. I mean, 11-1, their most wins in regular season since 2001. I mean, this is incredible stuff, and you just feel for BYU, because it's like, what else can they do in order to justify a spot? And given Notre Dame or any other brand, they'd be in with the resume they have.
Now there's this little backdrop for BYU that apparently Penn State likes Kalani Sitake. I think that this ends up just being a bigger contract for Kalani in Provo. I don't think he really wants to leave at all. How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I mean, this is the most surprising story of the season, quite frankly. I mean, I could see Kenny Dillingham leaving before I could see Kalani Sitake leaving, and I could not see Kenny Dillingham leaving. I mean, we know the history here. I mean, he went to BYU. He, moved with his family, with his dad to Provo, and as a young boy. So, it feels like all of the pieces point to him staying. And look, I mean, I think, and this is part and parcel to the business. Kalani probably owes it to the other coaches to, maximize his salary, and this is what he's doing. I mean, market value is important because it sets the whole, precedent for what everybody else is going to get. So if you're a head coach and you're not maximizing what you could possibly be making in terms of, exactly what he's doing right now, then you're doing a disservice to yourself and to the rest of the coaches. I mean, it's like your neighborhood where you live. If you're selling your house for less than market value, you're doing a disservice to all of the people who live in your neighborhood. And so I think in some ways this is exactly what Kalani's doing. I just don't see any way in which Kalani's out at BYU. That sounds crazy. I mean, why would you leave BYU with the success you've had? I mean, clearly they've got the ability to, to get money, to, bring the base together to make a much more lucrative position for BYU in order to offer money to the guys they want. Like, you've got everything. Why would you leave? And it's your alma mater, and. So, yeah, I just, for me, it makes zero sense. I mean, there are a lot of guys. I mean, Matt Campbell has had some flirtations with leaving Iowa State. Kenny Dillingham, we're seeing, has had a little bit of that with Arizona State already this year. But for me, the most surprising of all of them would be Kalani Sitake leaving, and I think they're all surprising.
Last thing before I let you go, was that Kyle Whittingham's last game as head coach? Does he coach the bowl game? What do you think?
Yeah, my guess is that he will coach the bowl game and that he will step aside following this season. I don't have the type of information that you have, OC, but it certainly feels like from previous conversations he's had where he's talked about, not wanting to coach at a certain period of his life, the fact that you've had Morgan Scalley as the head coach in waiting as long as you have, and the fact that you're not, after last season would be kind of egregious considering the success that Whittingham's had, but leaving after this season is completely justifiable. Like, you're never going to leave in the perfect situation. The idea that you're going to leave like John Elway after winning a Super Bowl, that's a rarity. You rarely get to go on your own terms, and it feels like, this is as good a terms as he could possibly be leaving on. So if I had to put some money down on it, I would say this is his last season, and I do think he'd coach to the bowl game. But it also seems like maybe you're better off letting Scalley coach the bowl game, kind of officially take over there.
We'll see how it plays out. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you joining us. We're going to keep calling until you tell us to stop, though. So I'll talk with you next week.
You're the best, OC. Take care, brother. Be well. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving.
Same to you. That's Ari Temkin. Big 12 today on TuneIn Radio. Big 12 Insider. All right, we just touched on it. I got to tell Kalani Sitake ain't leaving. I'll tell you why next. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700. Welcome to the Hot Lunch on Utah's #1 sports talk. We got Scott Mitchell, the Utah football insider and color analyst, coming up next. Here's the thing. Utah fans, if you're getting your hopes up that BYU is going to be without Kalani Sitake moving forward, don't get your hopes up. The interest from Penn State is very real. The interest from the Kalani Sitake camp to talk with Penn State, I've been told, is very, very real. But the reason I have zero belief that that job is ever going to happen for Kalani is because you've got a new athletic director in Provo, all right? You can make an argument that Brian Santiago is inheriting, because he's still going through that inheritance process, is inheriting maybe the best era of BYU athletics ever. I know that, hardcore fans in Provo are going to be like, well, what, the Lavelle Edwards? Yeah. I know. BYU basketball was not a top 5 team in the country while Lavelle Edwards was coaching Heisman Trophy winners and Outland Trophy winners and winning a national championship, okay? Right now, your 2 revenue-producing sports at BYU are as good as they can ever reasonably expected to be. They're great at the same time, okay? The PR that your school and, by extension, your religion are experiencing right now are at an all-time high. And I say that because Kalani Sitake is a big part of this machine. He says the right thing in every interview, okay? If you're a Utah fan, turn the volume down for a minute because you're going to hate hearing me give too much credit to BYU's head coach. But he's a great coach. He was asked post-game about Kyle Whittingham potentially being done at the University of Utah. And you know what he did? He gave a perfect answer. He said, I wouldn't be where I'm at today without Kyle Whittingham. A lot of guys on my staff would not be where we are today without Kyle Whittingham. He's been a great friend to me. If he decided he had no insider knowledge, but he was just like, I love Kyle Whittingham, basically. The rival head coach gave your guy a bunch of props. It was the perfect answer. Every time he's asked about, well, what about the college football playoff? Until now, he's been like, I'm not going to campaign for that. We're just going to go out and win football games. And what did? They went out, they controlled everything they can control to this point. And then finally he said, I do think we deserve to be in the college football playoff. All right? So you have right now a guy who somehow impossibly has cool points for the dorkiest university on the planet. He is the least hateable guy that you could put in that position, even for Utah fans. And he is one hell of a recruiter, developer, person, and football coach. If you're Brian Santiago and you don't match whatever he asks for, hey, Penn State says I get $10 million a year. I want 11 if you want me to stay here. Go find the money, Santiago. If you don't, you should be fired. And I think he will. I think BYU acknowledges, and it took some time, but I think BYU acknowledges that Kalani is that dude, is a guy that you cannot let go. And he will be, if you do what you're supposed to do, he will be a BYU lifer the way that Kyle Whittingham has been a Utah lifer. Kalani will retire in this job if you let him. He loves Provo. That was where he played, right? He loves the university. He loves the community. He loves the kids. He loves the role. Now, is there more pressure associated with being the head coach? Has he had to tamp down his personality just a little bit, a little of the fieriness, just a little bit, to make sure that he's the right figurehead for a religious program? Maybe. But he does it better than anyone has. He does it a hell of a lot better than Bronco did. He is so much more likable in that role, right? And again, I don't know why it has to be this way, but it is this way. BYU football is a missionary tool for the church. The community this year has rallied around this good BYU football team, and on every stop where you visit, right, the school, the fans, whatever, Texas Tech, you had a tragedy happen in your program, here's $100,000 help raised by the Mormon community, by the BYU fans, right? That's as big of a PR win as you could possibly imagine. Hey, guess what? We're going to Cincinnati, 27,000 pounds of food for your food pantry. Oh, you're going to chant bleep the Mormons? Oh, well, we're going to love you anyway. I mean, they're having their moment. If you do anything to let this escape you in Provo, every Utah fan should stand up, clap, and thank the powers that be for letting Kalani Sitake walk, because he would rather stay. And you probably can underpay him to stay because he's got family in Provo. He's got extended family in Provo. He doesn't want to move his kids all around the country. And he's got the situation he needs right now. BYU has no excuse to not back up whatever Brinks truck he asked for himself, his assistant coaches, and anyone associated with the program. If you don't do it, you have failed as an athletic department. You have screwed it up. And I know people are going to text in, and people have told me, well, Jay Hill can take over that job and do just as good. I love Jay Hill. Great coach. Awesome. Wonderful alternative. But he is the alternative. He is not the plan A. You don't have an excuse not to keep your plan A. You don't have the financial problems that even your rival has to deal with. And I know everyone's like, well, here come the other text. The church money doesn't belong to BYU football. Yeah, it does. Knock it off. All right? Whether you do it directly, which they don't, or they do it with, hey, here's a wealthy donor that someone from Salt Lake City in the headquarters can be like, hey, we really want to keep Kalani Sitake, and to do so, we're going to need you to up your commitment. All right, I can do that for you, brother. And I have no problem with it. I'm not insulting it. I'm not making fun of it. It's what should happen if you want to be competitive at the level that your fan base wants you to be competitive. If you want to continue the momentum that this program has right now, you cannot let Kalani Sitake go anywhere. You know who he's going to take with him if he goes to Penn State? Bear bleeping Bachmeier. And then you're screwed. Well, Ryder Lyons is coming. You don't even know if he's good. But you do know that Bear Bachmeier is a hell of a quarterback. He will be in the Heisman Trophy conversation next year to start the year. Do you realize that? You going to let his head coach walk away right now? You going to let him potentially go with that head coach? If BYU, this is the public service announcement from the Sean O'Connell Show to Brigham Young University. If you do not meet every single demand of Kalani Sitake to keep him in Provo, you deserve to be fired. BYU Athletics has never been in a better spot in its history ever as an athletic department, ever. And one half of that equation, and it's probably like 60% of that equation, all respect to KYU, to Kevin Young, and BYU basketball. Football is always a bigger thing. It just is in college sports. If you're going to let that walk away, malpractice, punishable by career death.
Absolutely. No notes there, OC. The only thing I was going to bring up, and you already touched on it, was, and I'll take this angle. I'm wondering aloud if there's enough people in the donor base that think, hey, it's a good thing we have Jay Hill in line to be the next head coach if Penn State offers whatever number is too much for us to pay. And that's the only thing that gives me pause and maybe as a counterpoint to what you're saying is there shouldn't be a number that's too high to pay. I wonder if there is, though, because maybe there's enough people in the donor base that are like, we're okay with rolling with Jay Hill, but I'm with you, though. I don't think that there should be a number too high to pay to bring back Kalani Sitake.
6879 says, I disagree. Kalani was losing to Liberty and UMass before Jay Hill showed up. Jay is making BYU what it is right now. Jay is absolutely an integral part of what makes BYU what they are. 100%. No notes. Not arguing that at all. If you don't think that Kalani Sitake is the right guy, you haven't been paying attention to how difficult it is to be the figurehead of the Mormon Church from a public standpoint on fall Saturdays and be a great coach and put together the right staff that includes Jay Hill and to recruit guys that, by the way, have no business being in Provo. I will say this. The Honor Code, they've done a good job of getting out of Kalani Sitake's way. Do you think that happened on accident? Do you think that happened because Kalani was just like, I'll do whatever you say, Honor Code? Or do you think that he came from an era under Lavelle Edwards where the Honor Code did what it was supposed to do and handled matters privately, and he demanded that they go back to that? Like, there are more wrinkles to being the head coach at BYU that Kalani, and it took some time, but that he has now mastered than just, hey, Jay Hill's put together a great defense. And he has, and he deserves credit for it, and he should get credit for it. But watch what'll happen if Jay has to take over, or Jay does take over as the head coach. It will not be as smooth a transition as you think.
And he will eventually, I have no doubt, he'll eventually become a great head coach at BYU or otherwise.
Yeah, he was a great head coach at Weber State. He can do it at BYU also, but
it'll take time, right?
He can't recruit the same dudes that made him great at Weber to BYU. Apples and oranges there. Now, Kalani has found a way to get a lot of these dudes. Like, I haven't done this. I don't know if anyone's done this. I don't know if there's even a way to do this. How many, go through the roster right now at BYU, and how many of those guys are practicing members of the LDS Church? It's probably at an all-time low.
I mean, you mentioned Bear Bachmeier. He's not.
Right?
And that would be, if Kalani were to go to Penn State, that would be a whole other reason why why Bear would be like, yeah, I have no problem leaving BYU. He doesn't have ties to the religion the way that some players on that team do, that are like, yeah, I will never leave BYU, right? Or to the state of Utah in the same way. So yeah, this is arguably your most important player is a great example of one of those guys that is not a member of the church, even though he does seem to fit the community really well in other ways.
So yes, Jay Hill, again, as good a plan B as you can find, but he's still the plan B. And if you allow, with what's going on right now, your program to have to make the choice to settle for plan B, it's not Kalani's fault if Penn State says, we'll give you $9.5 million a year, just show up. And BYU's like, well, we'll give you $7 million. That's your fault, BYU. That's not Kalani's if he leaves, because he still lives in the real world. All right, we've taken way too much time in the hot lunch, but I do that. Scott Mitchell is going to join us next. We'll talk a little Utah football. We'll see if he's processing the end of the season the same way that I am. Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 792.1 FM. We welcome in the Utah football legend, longtime NFL veteran, color analyst on all the Utah radio broadcasts, Scott Mitchell. Scott, how are you, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. I really am. Little melancholy that the season's over for Utah as far as the regular season. It's amazing how fast it goes, but so much happening in sports. It's exciting.
So 10-2. I was with a lot of the Utah fans that I was seeing on social media on Friday. You know, I'm sitting in a pile of leftovers and I'm watching the defense struggle again. And I'm, what's wrong with this team? What's wrong with these guys? Well, they found a way to win again. They finished the season with win after win after win after win. They don't all have to be pretty. And I felt like I caught myself, Scott, saying, what am I doing? The offense is humming. The defense, the pick six changed the game. So a little bit of a bend, don't break in that situation. We got a little bit spoiled over the course of this year, only one season removed from last year's disaster, a little bit spoiled on the idea that Utah somehow deserves to be in a college football playoff conversation or whatever, and that wins are not enough. Now I'm sitting in a place where I'm like, you know what, 10-2 is absolutely enough. Do I wish they had beat Tech and they had beat BYU? Of course. But this, I'm looking at it as a really, really good season, and especially the bounce-back season that the program needed. Not that just the team needed, but the program itself with all the NIL stuff and the Big 12 stuff and what's happening at BYU. This is what Utah football needed, and I'm satisfied in a way, even though as a sports fan you're never really satisfied. Am I letting the team off the hook? Am I letting the coaches off the hook by being okay with 10-2?
Well, if I look back on the season and look, winning 10 games is remarkable. I think people need to realize that there's kind of an even balance of talent across the Big 12. Kansas State was a pretty good team. Kansas, had some players, and they have quality. Utah, no one is like a team that's just a wealth of riches. Texas Tech maybe a little bit more, but other than that, the teams are evenly balanced. So you really have to have the breaks go your way to have a season that's going to put you in contention for the championship. The only thing for me that would be a disappointing part of the season is, could you imagine that the BYU-Utah game was the last game of the season? If it was this last weekend and both these teams are 10-1, the winner goes to the championship, more likely goes to the college football playoffs at that point, because their rankings would be different right now if the losses were where they were. Maybe not so much for BYU, but certainly for Utah. And so that's the only thing. It's like, Big 12, try to change this. Try to get this rivalry game at the end of the year, because then that would have just been such a compelling finish to the season. Not sure if it would have changed the outcome. I don't know. The defense kind of struggling this time of year, but the offense certainly had more production. But boy, wouldn't that have been a game? But for me, I'm extremely pleased with the season and where it ended. A couple of breaks this way or that way, it could go either way. I mean, they could have had more losses than they've had, just because the talent level is so balanced out. But a great season, and now it's just, for me, it's all about what's the best bowl game to go to for Utah. That's what I'm kind of interested in.
When we talk about the bowl possibilities for Utah, Vegas is mentioned, Alamo is mentioned, USC as an opponent would be fun and things like that. But I'm also looking at it, and it took me years to get to this point, Scott, where I'm looking at it and I'm saying, the bowl game is an extension of spring football. Now, you're not gonna have the same roster. You're gonna play a bunch of young guys. You might not have the same coaching staff. We'll see what kind of decisions are made this week or beyond by Kyle Whittingham and everyone else. And so I'm looking at a bowl game that is not part of the college football playoff, and I'm saying, like, I don't know if I'm going to even use that to help judge the rest of this season. Like, it could be the 11th win of the year, it could be the third loss of the year. Either way, I'm probably going to be like, all right, well, that's kind of a standalone in my opinion.
But for me, it's like, what are the amenities? Like you just, I don't want to go to the Las Vegas Bowl again because it's like for the millionth time. I want to go to the Holiday Bowl, or I would, if BYU loses in the championship game, there's a possibility. Well, there's a strong possibility they could be out of the playoffs. And if that's the case, where, could there be a rematch between Utah and BYU in the Alamo Bowl? That could be fun. For me, it's just, and I get the whole point about different time, different season, but I still think it's some kind of caveat or at least a cherry on top of things for this season. And you did win 10 games, and you really deserve to go to a good bowl game and celebrate that.
How big a deal will it be if Spencer Fano wins the Outland Trophy? He's one of the 3 finalists. He finished the season in impressive fashion, and I honestly think that he's a better candidate than the other 2 guys. But, nobody listens to me. How big of a deal would it be if he won it?
Well, it's huge. I mean, it's an extremely impressive award. It's it maybe second most to the Heisman Trophy. It's an award I don't believe has been a player from Utah has received. So that brings a lot of prestige to the team, and Spencer is certainly deserving of it. He's got a lot of hype this year. He's lived up to that hype. He's been, just a big part of the success and explosiveness of the offense, and well deserved. But that's a huge just notch on the belt. It's just another one of those things when you're a team and you're developing a history and. To say we've had Outland Trophy winners, it's just one of those things that really makes the team, and I think the conference too, having significant relevance. And hey, we've got great players in our conference who are considered some of the best in the entire country.
Scott Mitchell is my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking about all things Utah football. The regular season's in the books, and we've asked this question in one form or another every single week, it seems like, but the regular season is over. Kyle Whittingham started his tenure as Utah's head coach as a co-head coach in a bowl game. Any possibility that we get an announcement before the bowl game and Morgan and Kyle do the co-head coaching thing in whatever that bowl is?
I don't know the timing and the best timing of a coach when they step down, and even in this situation, if it is now, what is the impact? And I'm sure Kyle would do that and help out. What is the impact of me stepping down have on recruiting? Because recruiting is really kind of like right now, it's kind of that moment, that early signing period, which is basically the signing period now. And it'll have an impact, I think, on potentially portal guys, and do they stick around, do they leave, and so just kind of looking at where the best opportunity for that is to go, and I was thinking a lot about this over the weekend. No matter when it is, I don't know that there's ever really a good time for a coach to step down. I mean, there's a lot of controversy about Lane Kiffin and his decision to go to LSU over Ole Miss, and I just, they're ugly, and there's ups and downs to it, across the board. Even with the coaches, it's like, man, I'm retired now. I wish I'd have stayed longer. Or I wish I would have left a year earlier, or whatever. And no matter what, it just always seems that it's never a good time for a coach to step down. It's never, the right moment. I don't know that there are any, if many, that where it just goes, yeah, that was the absolute right time. So regardless, it's like Coach Whittingham has just taken this program to places it's never been, and just been a stalwart in just his the way he's run his program. I don't know that there's anyone in the last 30 years in college football that's done a better job than Kyle Whittingham with getting so much more out of less. Maybe you could argue for a period of time Chris Peterson, but Chris kind of stepped down maybe a lot sooner. So it's just been remarkable what Kyle has done. And I know he wanted to get to the college football playoffs before he bowed out, but what he's done with the program at Utah is just, I don't want to say it's miraculous, but it's extremely impressive.
So now we look at the kind of post-mortem of a 10-2 season for Utah, where these conversations that have started the last few weeks really kind of they get more important because of that signing day you talk about coming up. We're a month away from the transfer portal window opening up, and decisions are going to be made by players, by agents, by coaches in that regard. Let's assume that everything stays relatively consistent at the University of Utah. Either Coach Witt is back, or the succession plan goes how we think it could, and everyone else is back except for Coach Witt. How similar does this roster look next year compared to what it is right now?
I think the number one priority on a lot of players' mind is money, and not like it's just that I get some money, right? And so I think it's kind of figuring out what that looks like, and kind of because there's some players that I think are important to this team, but you have to put a number on everything. You have to kind of budget everything out, but then there's this, hey, we've got a good thing going here. I think this offense has a good thing going. I think it can be better than it was a year ago. But a lot of the pieces have to play out right, and the quarterback situation is certainly one of them. But you've got these young players like Daniel Bray, and you've got J.J. Buchanan, and you've got now you've got Larry Simmons kind of emerged as a guy a little bit, and so are there other people out there that are interested in some of these players, and to what extent, and do you have to overplay to keep players there? Because I think the best thing you can do is keep as many of your players as you possibly can, and really build from that and add to that. And so I would really focus on spending a lot more time with your guys that you have here. And now it's kind of nice because there's a cooling off period. There's a time where these players can have conversations with their coaches. It can be fleshed out who the coach is going to be and what direction they're going in, and you can get a better feel, and these players can get a better idea of maybe where they are, where they fit with everything. But it's certainly, to me, about evaluating who you have now, keeping them, and then identifying, okay, what can we really go get in the portal, and where are we really deficient? So I don't know where that fits as far as the percentage. Is it similar to last year? Last year, I think, worked out fairly well. You got a lot of new faces in here, and it seemed like the assimilation into things worked nicely. I was extremely impressed with Texas Tech and how much they changed their roster, but how quickly they gained confidence and chemistry and some continuity, with everything they were doing. And I think that's a model to look for. And I think it's about the right mix of keeping as many of your players as you can, and then just augmenting it with guys that can improve you. I don't know what that looks like, because because it's a dirty game. There'll be coaches that are from other schools that'll drive up the price of one of your players and force you to overpay for someone, and then you have less resources. And there's just all kinds of shenanigans that goes on now with the NIL stuff, and it's hard, to kind of navigate through that. So I just think, you have the most communication with the guys in your building, you have the most chemistry, and keeping as many of them as you can, I think, is a good strategy moving forward.
Before I let you go, I'm about to rant for 20 minutes about the Lane Kiffin situation. Give me your thoughts.
It's such a hard world that we're forced to live in right now. But players and coaches are really faced with the same dilemma. These players, there's no loyalty to a program. These players will go in the transfer portal in a heartbeat, in a minute, and you work really hard to recruit them, and you can't control them. You can't keep them in your program. if they want to go somewhere else. And so now I don't feel sorry for anyone in today's college football landscape. I think the ceiling of where if you look at Lane Kiffin, you go bigger ceiling at LSU than at Ole Miss, but there's also a lot more pressure with it. LSU has won national championships. They have a plethora of talent all the time, and they'll continue to have that. And if LSU can pay out Brian Kelly and pay Lane Kiffin, there's money in the coffers to do a lot of things. And so I can't fault Lane Kiffin. I know a lot of people they're kind of mixed on it across the board, but that's the craziness of college football today. And Lane Kiffin, I don't know what his personal goals are. Maybe he wants to be a coach that coaches teams that are going to compete for national championships all the time, and you're not going to do it at Ole Miss. I mean, I don't care what, no matter what he does, he's never going to be better than Georgia. He's never going to be better than Alabama at Ole Miss, but he can be at LSU. And so from a pure, hey, this is your life, this is your career, you really have to look out for what's the best. There's no sense of, or a minimal sense of, loyalty to the program and where all this. It's loyalty to what's in my best interest and to dollar amount, and that's just the landscape of football, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's what it is, and I think you have to be honest about that position. Now you look at some programs, and culture has been a part of what's built them, but I just think it's really hard to do that today, and I think it's hard because of the timing, and you've put a lot into your time at Ole Miss, and you've done a remarkable job there. But the way you have to make a decision when you have to do it because of recruiting and NIL stuff, you got to go now, and that's just the unfortunate nature of it. And what it does for Ole Miss, it could bump them out of the college football playoffs. And who knows, with a couple of other losses, maybe Utah ends up in the playoffs because of this. I don't know, but I don't like it, but I can't fault him for doing what he did.
Well, we'll see how that plays out. I'm of the opinion that LSU is going to have buyer's remorse like they did with Brian Kelly, but I've been wrong once or twice. Scott, you're the man. Always appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me again.
You got it. We'll see you.
That's Scott Mitchell, host of the Down and Dirty right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. And yes, we've got the Daily Dump coming next. The Daily Dump, the whole conversation is going to be dominated by the mess of the current college football coaching carousel. We're also going to be giving away some tickets. We've got Runnin' Utes versus Mississippi State. That's not this coming Friday, but next. It's Saturday. It's December 13th. Not this Saturday, but the following Saturday, December 13th, the Salt Lake Showcase at the Delta Center. I've got a 4-pack of Runnin' Utes versus Mississippi State tickets that we'll give away next in the Daily Dump on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. All right, time for the Daily Dump on ESPN 700 at 92.1 FM. The coaching carousel is an absolute mess. A mess that I wish we could flush out of college football with the help of Valley Plumbing, clean out the drain. Here's the thing. The Lane Kiffin saga is as much a symptom of the illness permeating college football as anything else. Now, Lane is the exact vector to, he is patient zero, all right? He is the perfect person to kind of highlight this entire disgusting farce of an accountability system, because he's all about Lane, right? I just cannot imagine how we got to a place. Well, I can't imagine it because it's all about money, but I regret the fact that we have gotten to a place in college sports and in college football in particular where a team that has done everything their coach asks and has benefited from doing all those things that the coach asks, to the point of you are now competing for a national championship. And that while you are on the precipice of the invitation to the actual tournament where you compete for that conference, or that national championship, the highest honor in the land in your current world, right? Because college football, when you're an athlete, it is your whole damn world, all right? And then that coach, who is maybe your father figure, probably in Lane Kiffin's situation, probably not, right? But he is the figurehead, he is the CEO, he is the boss of your company. And your company has a chance to be the best in the world, at least this year. And he walks in and he says, that wasn't good enough, guys. That's not good enough for me. Wait, what do you mean? Coach, we are right here. We are on the doorstep of the goal that we set, the unrealistic goal for that matter that we set. We're right here. Yeah, it's not good enough for me, guys. Why? Well, because somebody else over here across the street, by the way, that you're going to have to see every single year, that we saw earlier this year, you have to ask them why they're willing to pay more. No. We're going to pay the same. Oh, yeah, that's right. You know what? I'm just kind of sick of you guys. I'm kind of sick of the environment here. I'm kind of sick of the neighborhood. I'm kind of sick of this. I'm going to go there.
I want how big was the house that we looked up in Baton Rouge, OC, a couple weeks ago? I want the 11-bedroom house, not the 7-bedroom house.
Can you imagine in any other context where you're like, hey, I know that you've done everything we've asked, and you are like all the goals that we set together in our friendship, company, relationship, whatever, are right here. They're very attainable. They're here in front of us. It's not good enough for me, and I'm going. And I'm also going to blame the athletic director and pretend like it's his fault I'm not going to finish the job when I have decided I don't want to finish this job. And I'm going to tell everyone that he wouldn't let me finish the job when everyone knows that even if I did stay here to finish the job, I'm doing it with one foot in the other yard. I'm doing it while I'm telling you, hey, man, you should come with me to LSU.
Yeah, there's no incentive. There really is no incentive for Ole Miss to be like, yeah, go ahead and finish. I mean, I've heard and I've read a lot of people online and on TV trying to say, well, the incentive is he's the coach that could maybe win you a national championship this year, but at the cost of losing your entire roster to LSU next year.
And look, North Texas is in the same situation. Their coach is going to Oklahoma State. They're letting him finish out, okay?
A little bit different in North Texas.
It's certainly different because anyone who can compete at Oklahoma State and is currently at North Texas deserves the opportunity to do so. Ole Miss and LSU are right now in 2025 at best a lateral move, and that's another reason why this is insane, because if you're an athletic department, if you're a university that has given this person who's kind of a pain in the ass everything he's asked for 8 years, and now he's gotten to the point where it's like, hey, we're where you said you could get us and where we said we would get you. We reached this peak together. So let's continue this. We'll match the offer. Just stay. And that person's just like, nah. Why? Your kid goes to school here. Yeah, I know, but her boyfriend is at LSU, so she'll come to LSU if that's where I'm moving.
Is she the reason? Hey, Dad.
That would be fun.
I want to be closer to what's his face.
Honestly, if that's the reason, he should just say that, and I will respect him for it.
Here's the other thing that kind of bugs me about this, and I will acknowledge being in Utah and not having lived in the Mississippi or Louisiana, not having covered teams out there very closely, right? Covered them from afar. I don't know the nuances of the differences of the guys you can recruit in Mississippi that you can recruit in Louisiana. It's been said that in the high school ranks, you can get a lot higher talent in Louisiana, and because LSU is the flagship school, they're not going to go to Ole Miss if you stay at Ole Miss, right? They're going to go to LSU, right? I've heard that point. It's not an invalid point, but also, have you looked at a map? They border each other. Mississippi and Ole Miss and Louisiana are right next to each other. Like, you're telling me if you're that good of a recruiter, Lane Kiffin, which he has shown he's pretty good at, right? You can't convince a guy to go a few hundred miles farther from home?
Well, you know what else is
by
crazy?
Staying at Ole Miss?
You know what else is crazy about it? Like, even before it was legal to do what Ole Miss is doing in their recruiting department now, they were, like, Ole Miss showed, before Lane Kiffin ever got there, Laramie Tunsil, Laquan Treadwell, Robert Kimdiche. Do you know these names? You do. And they went to Ole Miss. Laramie Tunsil literally dropped in the draft because he was like, he had the gas mask with the marijuana thing, right?
Yeah.
And one of the ways that he kind of redeemed that whole situation was when he was just honest about it. Is it true people were paying your bills at Ole Miss? He's like, yeah. Yeah, when my mom needed money, I would just tell the GA or whoever it was, whoever that person was, I would just tell him, hey, I need some more money. And they took care of me. He was one of the first players who was like fresh out of college and in the NFL and on this kind of personality redemption tour. And he was just like, yeah, and? Like, Robert Kimdiche and Laquan Treadwell were like the #1 recruits in their classes, and they went to Ole Miss. Do you think, did any of us sit back and be like, they must really love Oxford? No, we were like, okay, bagmen. This is fresh off the Cam Newton stuff. Like, yeah, Ole Miss has shown not only recently, but going back before Lane Kiffin even got there, they will do whatever they can to try and support football success and recruiting success very specifically. And if his reasoning is like, well, they got better players in Louisiana, all right, then you better only recruit Louisiana, Lane.
Seriously, and to be fair, I haven't heard him or his camp give those reasons yet. That's just people, like, it may have been Feinbaum, may have been people who covered the SEC talking like that, and I'm like, what are we talking about here? We're not talking about him trying to if he stayed at Ole Miss, he's trying to convince guys from New Orleans area to go to Michigan.
Dude,
like, we're talking about going a few hundred miles west.
Well, the other thing about it is that's so nuts, right? Is this is not happening when Lane Kiffin has taken like this little engine that could program to a plucky 8-win season, kind of like, you know, some of the other comparisons, like some of these like Memphis coaches that are moving on and the Tulane's coach is moving on and the North Texas coach is moving on. We're talking about someone who's moving on from a program that is nationally in the hunt for a championship. It's very similar to when Brian Kelly left Notre Dame for LSU.
It really is. Same school.
And by the way, I don't know how, if you're LSU, you can feel good about this hire now with the mess that it has become and with just the way that Lane Kiffin has to answer these questions and the fact that, like, he's telling his assistants, get on the plane. Like, LSU is cold-blooded, man. They're just like, hey, we will win at all costs. 2-3 weeks removed, by the way, from your governor being like, we're not paying a contract like this ever again. Not going to happen. Oh, you're right.
On my taxpayers' dime.
You're right. It's now a bigger contract. Like, this is so – and Lane Kiffin, I think, is an awesome coach. X's and O's guy's great, right? Lane Kiffin, though, has not done the thing that you're now paying Lane Kiffin with the assumption he's going to do. Raise your hand, James, and tell me how many championships Lane Kiffin has won as a head coach.
Got something holding my arms down. I don't know why.
Has Lane Kiffin won a conference championship as a head coach?
I don't think he has, unless he did it at FAU.
Well, did he win a conference championship at FAU that I'm missing? He maybe did.
But even if he did, that's Conference USA, right? That's Sun Belt. Like,
I just
like
don't
cool story,
get it.
bro.
I just don't get it. Like, I cannot imagine. And by the way, the reports, depending on who you listen to, the reports of Lane Kiffin going into the meeting, and the players were like begging the athletic director, like, let him stay and coach. Other reports are like more believable to me, where the players are like, get out of here. You're leaving us while we are right here. We are at the, I don't know, we're at the 20, we're in the red zone going in to score, and you just it's like your quarterback. Imagine if Trinidad Chambly had done this. Red zone on the 17-yard line, and he's just like, I'm done. Walks off the field. That's what is happening.
Job done.
This Ole Miss football team can look at Lane Kiffin and just be like, how many of these guys want to go to LSU with him? Independent of him throwing a lot of money at them, because of course that factors in. But if it was just like, hey, do you want to cut? Like if Urban Meyer, when he left Utah, had said to, I don't know, anyone on that team who had eligibility left, again, no money involved, just said, hey, you can transfer independently of everything else without penalty. Eligibility will not be. You can come to Florida with me. Anyone he offered would have gone. And actually, 2 guys did. But a lot of guys would have gone, right? Because Urban, apples and oranges, different situation, because it was kind of like a one-game sort of deal. He decided to coach out, to finish, coach the Fiesta Bowl. Different time in athletics, different time on the recruiting and the transfer portal, wasn't real and all those things, right? But, like, people still believed in him as a coach. And probably a lot of guys would have followed him if they had the opportunity. I bet it's 6 that follow him from Ole Miss, because the message you are being sent as a player is, even though you've done every single thing I asked, not good enough, I'm going over there instead. Why would I follow that guy? That is not a leader. That is not someone that I want to attach my success or failure to, because I've had so much success and that person is not satisfied by it. This is Lane Kiffin is the spouse that lives in a big house, has a groundskeeper, a maid, a chef, a private plane, a whatever, provided for by the hard work of other people, of the other spouse. I'm not gendering these spouses, by the way, so don't get mad at me for this, right?
The non-breadwinner of the spouses.
The non-breadwinner is just living in the lap of luxury at the behest and the hard work of the breadwinner, and is like, I'd like a divorce now. Why? The grass is not greener.
Yeah.
It's literally not greener. In fact, their grass right now is brown, and if you want it to be green, you have to make it green. Ours is already green. Yeah, I just don't like it here anymore. Like, if you're LSU, even if it does work out, even if Lane Kiffin does take you, I don't know, to a college football playoff, which he's able to do at Ole Miss, let's say he does that. You think that he's not leaving for an NFL job before you get to compete for a national championship?
Seriously, he's not going to be the Giants head coach and coach Jackson Dart again Just as an example.
Yeah, you think
a hypothetical.
You think Lane Kiffin is going to tell the New York Giants no, or the San Francisco 49ers no, or he's going to tell the Dallas Cowboys nope, I'm happy here at LSU.
It's ridiculous.
This is gross. And again, I've kind of like accepted that this is the way of things in college football, that money drives everything, and that like I've accepted it for the most part. And I'm just like, all right, I'll get on board because I still want to watch and I still love watching the games and all that kind of stuff. But this one is so bothersome because he dragged the team along for 2 weeks, made the headlines all about himself, which I don't think he necessarily had a ton of control over. And then ultimately he said, good job on a great season, guys. I'm not going to finish it with you. Bye, bye, bye. It's gross, man.
It really
disgusting.
is. It really is. And listen, it is also valid. The other angle to this, it's valid, and I agree with the idea that the huge part of this problem and why this gross thing played out, right? A coach leaving a potentially national champion, certainly a college football playoff team before the playoffs even started, is because of how the calendar's messed up too. And that I think that's important to acknowledge that too. But at the same time, that head coach, there's no way a head coach of that program should be making a lateral move. Like, it's still him that made that decision. The calendar didn't make him make this decision. As messed up as the calendar is, that makes it so that other teams have to get a coach in before the season's over, right? That's messed up. But Lane Kiffin, the calendar didn't tell Lane Kiffin to bail on his guys. Lane Kiffin did that all by himself.
In the 24-94, Lane Kiffin, he wanted to coach Ole Miss in the playoffs. No, he didn't. Don't say that. If he wanted to coach Ole Miss in the playoffs, he would stay at Ole Miss and coach him in the playoffs.
He'd be the head coach.
Don't fall for the propaganda. Ole Miss, for weeks now, has said, we will match the offer. We will match the offer. We will match the offer. If you wanted to finish it out with your team, if you actually believed in the thing you were telling these kids, then you would finish it out with them. And you would say, all right, I'll stay next year too. Maybe. You don't even have to. But you could tell LSU, I will come after our season is over. You could tell them that. And if LSU says, then we're not going to hire you, Lane. You say, all right, I have to finish this out. That's what Urban Meyer did. I know it's a different situation. That's what the North Texas coach is doing right now. I know it's a slightly different situation. But don't fall. If you are, Lane Kiffin, he wanted it. No, he didn't. He wanted to maximize his own potential in earnings. And that's fine if that's what you're into. But if I'm a member of this team, if I'm a believer that college sports should, on some level, have something to do with more than money. Like, here's a great example of this, okay? Under any circumstances on planet Earth, will Kalani Sitake take the Penn State job before BYU's season is done?
Yeah, there's no way.
No. Well, Kalani, he wanted to coach BYU in the conference championship game, but Penn State said no. Kalani would say, fine, kick rocks. If you don't want me to finish out what I started with these guys, then you're not hiring me. And Penn State would probably be like, okay, do it. And then we will take you. And yeah, you'll have a slightly shorter recruiting window, but it's going to be fine because we're signing you for 7 years. And we don't need you to get started this week in preparation for the next 7 years. Like, let's be realistic, people. If Kalani Sitake has a $9 million plus job on his desk right now from Penn State, I promise you he's not taking it before BYU's football season is over. At least not the conference championship. Maybe before an Alamo Bowl or something like that. But that's an apples to oranges equivalent. Mississippi, Ole Miss is not going to a meaningless bowl game. They're going to the college football playoff. All right, 877-353-0700, a 4-pack of tickets to your Runnin' Utes taking on Mississippi State at the Delta Center, not this coming Saturday, but next Saturday. If you could tell me, 877-353-0700, Utah's leading tackler this year is who? Utah football's leading tackler. Text in the correct name. We'll give you a 4-pack of tickets. We got to double up here because I went way too long in the Daily Dump. Brought to you by Valley Plumbing. Look for the truck with the duck. Hour 3 next on the Sean O'Connell Show. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Hello, Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700, 92 FM. Text line is lighting up today, James, and I'm going against company policy, and I'm texting back. You're probably going to get a couple emails, so I apologize in advance. 877-353-0700.
You're clapping back, huh?
Well, look.
You're putting your name at the end, right?
No, it says James Peterson on all these.
All right, fine, I'll own it. That's me.
Here's the thing,
That's me responding.
No, I'm telling you, if you've been texting between the hours of 11 a.m. and 1:07 p.m. To 877-353-0700, it is me responding to you. It is not James, although we are under his text groove account.
It's my account. So, hey, listen, if there's some backlash, I'll take it. I'm the captain of the ship here.
I'm not
even though it wasn't me.
I'm not using any bad words. Okay, I'm just making points. I'm just presenting my opinions and my opinions that I think are based in fact. But people are spicy today, and that's fine. You've been debating your family members at Thanksgiving dinner. We had one, by the way. I spent Thanksgiving. We had one. I said, one of the predictions I made this year that I'm a little nonplussed I was correct about. But if you go back to early, before the season started, there were a lot of folks, right, including the pundits, the poll makers. There was no official poll, but there were all the fake polls, right, that said, hey, BYU's going to have a rough year this year. And I was not among those people, James. On this show, we were like, no, guys, don't count on BYU having a bad year because Jake Retzlaff is gone. They're going to be fine.
I was saying I was skeptical of them being nearly as good as they ended up being, OC. I didn't think that they were going to be true, conference championship contenders. You said they absolutely will be. You didn't predict 11-1, but you said they'll absolutely be in the conference championship conversation all year. So I got to give you credit for that.
I also didn't think Texas Tech was going to make this good on all the transfers.
Absolutely not.
I thought that they were going to be a lot better, but I didn't think they were going to be this good. And now you've got a matchup that I really wonder. It's hard. It's impossible for us to zoom out far enough. But maybe we'll run a straw poll. Maybe I'll send out a mass email to all of the national media contacts that I have, just to because nobody with a Utah T-shirt in their drawer thinks that BYU is going to beat Texas Tech. Everyone's like, we'd be a better matchup for Tech. We being Utah would be a better matchup for Texas Tech. Now, that confidence eroded some in the last couple of weeks because of the 500-plus yards of offense you surrendered to Kansas State and to Baylor, and then, of course, you were pushing that to Kansas. But BYU is the team that plays against Texas Tech. Are we rooting for BYU to win that game so the Big 12 has more representation in the college football playoff? Can you not stomach the idea of rooting for BYU in a conference championship game, period? Because there is the possibility, right, that you finish with the same record at the end of the year. If BYU loses the conference championship game and then doesn't get into the college football playoff, then, you win another game in your bowl game. You guys could have the same record.
Yeah. Technically, BYU could be one win more with their bowl win or one more loss. So you could actually finish with a better record than BYU.
I guess you could from a percentage standpoint.
Because they had one more, because they had one extra game.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And look, I'm not going to be here even on a Utah football station. I am not going to sit here and tell you that Utah's had a better season than BYU because it's objectively untrue. They beat you in the head-to-head, which is really what matters. And then they have, in the regular season, they have one more win, and they're headed to the conference championship game. So, that sucks. We have to swallow that. We have to take that medicine in the Utah football world for the next 300 and however many days. And then you hope next year. This offseason, by the way, and I tweeted this last night, this is going to be from about today to next Saturday is as important of a week as the state of Utah has ever seen in football. because some massive, massive decisions are going to be made and some massive results and things are going to play out one way or another. So the most obvious one of those is the question that's been, underneath everything we've talked about all year. Is this Kyle Whittingham's last year? I've made my thoughts on it very, very clear. If my understanding is correct, he has to let the university know by Friday. It doesn't mean that we are going to know by Friday, but I think that the university will know by Friday. I think that the most likely outcome is a co-head coaching situation. I don't think he's going to walk away before the bowl game, and that Morgan Scalley will be elevated, as has been the plan for however long. But that's still massively impactful because there's other things that come into play with that, right? These conversations are happening now at the Utah football facility. What does Jim Harding do? He's a huge, huge part of the fact that Utah football won 10 games this year. If you didn't have the offensive line that you had, you don't win 10 games. So what does Jim Harding do? A couple seasons ago, you got him to stay. The package deal that was going to be him and Ludwig to Notre Dame, they both said no. Didn't work out all that well for Ludwig. I think it did work out well for Jim Harding. I don't know if there were any promises made beyond, hey, we'll give you a raise and we'll keep you here. Like, does Jim Harding think that he's going to be the offensive coordinator if Morgan does take over? Let's say Morgan doesn't get to take over this year. Is Jim Harding willing to wait around and remain on the staff if that's something that he expects?
Just a hypothetical.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Does Morgan Scalley have a good relationship with Harding? Does he have a good relationship with Jason Beck? If he's taking over, those things are of critical importance. I don't think it's going to be real easy for Utah to retain Jason Beck this year. If you are how many jobs are open right now? All of them in college football?
Yeah.
Like Penn State, Michigan State, UCLA. Did UCLA hire someone today?
UCLA did not hire anyone officially yet, but they seem to be narrowing in on the James Madison head coach. Is it Bob McChesney?
Okay, yeah.
McChesney.
Wait, so are those the open Big Ten jobs am I missing? Is Wisconsin open right now? Let's see. Wisconsin,
I don't think
Illinois.
I think it's just those. I think it's just those.
Okay, Big Ten jobs are a big deal, right?
Yeah.
We know that the SEC's got some openings right now.
Although they have narrowed it down. Obviously, Kiffin to LSU, and then the other two, Florida and Arkansas, have kind of not official but have been narrowed.
Well, and Kiffin's defensive coordinator is taking over as the permanent head coach at Ole Miss. All right.
All right. Those seem to be closing.
So that's starting to close and settle. Now, head coaching jobs, they're all figuring out. Every one of those people has to make a staff, right? So when that deck shuffles, like it's going to at some point, maybe this year, maybe next year at the University of Utah, when that deck reshuffles, even if just the top man goes, then these questions that I'm asking about, well, what's Morgan Scalley's relationship like with the offensive side of the football, right? Like Atuaya and Simon and Beck, they've been here for 1 year. Now, maybe they all love Morgan and Morgan loves all of them. Maybe Morgan is like, I've been wanting to bring Andy Ludwig back, and he's promised me that he's going to. I have no idea. I'm not telling you that this is coming from Morgan or anyone else, but all of this matters a lot. Maybe Aaron Roderick would rather coach for Morgan Scalley than for Kalani Sitake. I don't think that's the case, but maybe it is. Maybe he's just like, dude, I'm sick of driving to Provo. A-Rod still lives in Salt Lake City, okay? Maybe he's like, dude, I'm having a hard time. I want to grow a beard. I'm obviously being facetious here, but there are all these possibilities. If you're the new Michigan State head coach, you're the new UCLA head coach, you're the new Arkansas head coach, you're the new whatever head coach. You're probably looking around the country. If it's not someone you know and are married to already, you're probably looking around the country and be like, who impresses me most as an assistant right now? Well, the first place you go is the Art Broyles Award, right? That's the top assistant coach in the country. Who's had the best job, who's done the best job this year as assistant coaches? Guess who's a finalist for that? Jason Beck, what did he do? What did he do at Utah? Let me just clickety-clack. Let's see where Utah was in 2023 and 2024 offensively. Oh, geez. Yikes. Oh, no. Oh, no. The humanity. Let's see where they've been in 2020. Oh, wow. Look at this. They scored how many points? They averaged how many first downs? They were how good in the red zone? Number 1 red zone offense in the country? Utah? So, again, the job, all that stuff I did about how BYU should not let Kalani Sitake go, and if they did, without like the most firm and intense fight possible, how it would be malpractice and it would be a fireable offense. Turn that down from an 11 to about an 8, and that's how I feel about retaining Jason Beck on this staff. If Jason Beck is getting phone calls, if his agent is just like, dude, Oregon is really interested in you right now. I was only talking about the jobs that are changing, right?
Yeah.
Well, there are going to be incumbent coaches whose assistants move on to other things.
Lane Kiffin wants you as his offensive coordinator.
I'm confident Jason Beck does not want to go work for Lane Kiffin.
Also, it's been very well reported that Lane Kiffin is, if they're willing to come with him to LSU, he's taking his offensive staff from Ole Miss.
So Ole Miss needs a new offensive staff.
Yeah.
Right?
And Lane Kiffin was the play caller, so like the defensive coordinator who's now the head coach is not going to be calling offensive plays.
Jason Beck loves humidity and mosquitoes, I've been told. No, again, obviously I'm trying to inject a little humor here, but these are serious problems. The landscape of college football in Utah is going to be shaped by what happens in these next 7 days, perhaps more than any time since. Like, the deck has been shuffled a couple times, right? Utah going to the Pac-12 was huge, massive. BYU deciding to go independent, also massive. That changed the whole calculus for football in the state of Utah for some time, right? BYU getting the invite to the Big 12 Conference, boom, boom, boom. That deck gets shuffled again. That was a seismic shift, right? And then, of course, the Pac-12 dies and Utah gets the invite to the Big 12, and now they're back in the same conference together. That's big. Now, neither of them have won a Big 12 championship. BYU has an opportunity to do that this week, not next year. They could do that in 6 days, in 5 days. They could do that. And if they do that, because recency bias is all that matters, right? Winning the head-to-head is enough for BYU to say, hey, we're ahead of you in the race right now. The NIL funding for BYU right now is enough for them to say, hey, we're ahead of you in the race, Utah, right now. Utah, though, they're like step for step at this moment. If BYU wins a Big 12 championship and heads into the college football playoff, which is something that Utah has never done, now we're talking about, uh-oh. And obviously that it doesn't create a distance that you can't make up because BYU is able to do that. But it's like, oh, geez. Suddenly, instead of being step for step and, really good rivals and it's going to be a one-score game every year, suddenly all the local talent is just like, I might go to BYU instead of Utah. And now we're talking about, uh-oh. So this week is one of the most important weeks in the history of our state from a sports perspective because college football now runs everything here.
Yeah, and it's not an insurmountable gap, like you said, between the two programs. If BYU is able to beat Texas Tech on Saturday and be the first team from the state of Utah to win a Big 12 championship and go to the college football playoff, but it becomes a very insignificant gap. BYU slightly ahead. We beat you the last 2 years. Look at our win total the last 2 years. Look at how we made it to the conference championship. It goes from that to all of a sudden, that's a mountain we got to climb a little bit here if you're from the University of Utah's perspective. So, yeah, absolutely massive. The other thing, and I'm glad you bring up the impact on recruiting, potential impact on recruiting there, OC, because remember in the Pac-12 era, BYU's independence era, remember all the players in BYU's backyard that decided to go to Utah? We could end up seeing a lot more of that. Flip it if BYU pulls off this upset and beats Texas Tech, and all of a sudden, that's a significant gap. It's not an insurmountable gap, but that's a significant gap between the two programs.
And it's something that I don't foresee happening because we believe Texas Tech is probably going to win the game. And even though it will be in a lot of ways unfair if BYU gets left out of the college football playoff, the most likely outcome is they get left out of the college football playoff. And as a Utah fan, you probably aren't excited to hear me say that's unfair, but let's call it down the middle here. BYU has had a great football season, one that I think should be rewarded, and they have an opportunity to beat Texas Tech. That I don't think that game's going to be a blowout. I just think that Texas Tech is on a different level right now. I mean, they have two of the best 5 defensive players in the entire country on one defense. Their quarterback is just kind of meh, in my opinion. But what did they do in the transfer portal? They went out, they deployed their funds, which, by the way, is never a bad thing in college football. If you have the donors to give you that money and you want to spend it, that's the rule. Go ahead and do it. Play under that rule set. That's great. Texas Tech has done a better job of it than I gave them credit for because I didn't think Joey McGuire was as good of a coach as he's shown us this year that he is. I think there's a lot of coaches out there, and Deion Sanders, unfortunately, has kind of proven to be this, where you can get a bunch of donor support and you can pay a bunch of guys a bunch of money, and it doesn't automatically translate to victories. Texas Tech has done something remarkable this year, truly remarkable. I mean, I would not be surprised if there's NFL teams looking at what's going on at Texas Tech and just being like, who's their GM? Look at what this coach did. In a professional model, he brought in all the best available free agents, and he immediately got them playing together as a unit. We have seen this in the NFL many times. You're like, how do they have those two guys rushing the passer and they can't get to the quarterback? Because the scheme doesn't work, whatever. Texas Tech deserves a huge amount of credit. And I'm saying that, and none of you are driving listening you can't give Texas Tech credit. You have to, right? Which means you have to give BYU credit. They lost their starting quarterback from a year ago, brought in a freshman in the fall, not in the spring, not as an early enrollee, brought in a freshman in the fall. He wins the starting job, and when he leaves BYU, and if you're a Cougar fan, you hope that's in 3 years or 4. If you're a Utah fan, you hope that's this year when Kalani takes a Penn State job. Spoiler alert, he's not going to take it. That's pretty incredible. So you got to give him credit. Now, there's a real possibility that they are not rewarded for any of it in a way that we as a sporting public have now deemed worthy, which is another problem I have. And is another thing I found myself over the weekend falling into, where now we do this thing where you're like, if you don't win it all, it wasn't a good season. And again, that's a bar that you can hold a team up to because they've been there before, right? You won more regular season games this year than you did in the conference championship years in the Pac-12. And by the way, when you lost games in the Pac-12, you didn't only lose them to the best teams in the conference. Those Pac-12 championship years, you were losing games. Well, the first one, you lost to San Diego State, to BYU.
Who ended up having a really good year that year.
Sure. And then you lost, but those were both teams that were supposed to be beneath you.
Yeah.
And we know the circumstances. You weren't starting the right quarterback, right? And then the conference game you lost was Oregon State, right?
Yeah. And they were good team, but not at your level.
They were a solid team, right? They were not a team that you can actually kind of explain why. Now, I will listen to any argument. Well, yeah, it's more impressive because you beat the teams that were supposed to be better than you, and then you kind of lost games you shouldn't have lost. Sure. But I found myself over the weekend, and I started the show talking about this, going holy cow, guys, what are we doing here? This is this is a really good team that I was participating in, and then I kind of like backed off of it. But watching the game, everyone's just like, oh, no, not again. We stink. This team does not stink by any stretch of the imagination. They just look different than you're accustomed to them looking.
Yeah, is this the most melancholy Utah fans have been about a 3-game win streak?
Is this?
Or I guess 4-game win streak, but really the last 3 games were the ones defensively they did not
5-game
live up
win
to
streak,
it.
by the way.
A 5-game win streak, excuse me.
Colorado, Cincinnati,
Yeah.
Baylor. Okay.
But the first 2 they lived up to the billing. The last 3, at least defensively, they did not.
And the Baylor game is just like, oh, well, you gave up kind of a bunch of meaningless passing yards, but you still scored 55.
Yeah.
Kansas State, look, that game was ugly. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't ugly.
It was an albatross.
Kansas was ugly in the first half. They kind of figured it out, and your defense scored for you, right? So, I mean, do we have coordinator's corner with Morgan this week?
Unfortunately, we do not. Not a game week.
We only get those in the game week. We should have been like, no, you got to do it every week.
We should reach out to Junk and be like, hey, can we get Morgan on?
I want to see what he has to say about it, right? Because again, your tendency as a fan is to just be like, that was gross and I hated it. And we had a text come in earlier today that like, hey, I think a big problem was there was no obvious like vocal leader on the defense. And that's probably fair, right? Because last year your vocal leaders were guys that, well, I don't know if that's even fair. I think Smith is kind of a talker, a little bit at least. Smith Snowden was great this year. Lander he's not as natural a vocal leader.
He's well spoken for sure, but he's not he's not that obvious vocal leader.
He also didn't play up to the level that everyone knows he's capable of, which makes it harder with your own teammates. You can't be yelling at guys and firing up guys when you're not playing up to the level of your athleticism, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how vocal John Henry Daly is, but his play spoke loud enough. I'm just looking at it, and I'm seeing, all right, this is a 10-win team, and context matters. So this is a 10-win team coming off a 5-win season when all of us, myself included, were starting to wonder about how sustainable Utah's place in the college football world is. Because you're never going to win the NIL battle. You're not. You're probably not going to win the coaching salary battle, although Kyle Whittingham is highly compensated even compared to his Big 12 peers. You're going to have a hard time in the modern era of college football selling your program the way that you did in the past, because now, as your championship success has brought you onto a new recruiting plane, yeah, you're recruiting guys who expect to be developed for the NFL. And that's a good thing. You're in the room for 4- and 5-star athletes. Kelvin Obot's going to be their first 5-star, right? That's wonderful. That guy expects to be a first-round draft pick. You get to say, hey, look, we got 2 of them right here. Okay, that's good. Now, the first-round draft picks playing offensive tackle at Alabama, he's getting $2.5 million this year. What's your guy getting? And then you got to be like, hey, look over here. We have a nice facility too, right? Because that's where it starts to shake and become a little bit more difficult for Utah. So I was, and we fielded questions about this. We talked about it a lot. There was this worry heading into the year that, like, if you didn't right the ship now, would you ever be able to right the ship without tearing it all down and rebuilding? If you didn't right the ship in 2025, the ship might sink. And I know that sounds dramatic, but I feel comfortable saying it now because you did right the ship. And it's not so doom and gloom because we can all look at it and say, oh, well, they did, though. The ship did not sink. In fact, the ship is outpacing everyone else in the conference except for 2 teams, which very unfortunately this year, one of them happens to be your in-state rival, who is going to win that money battle with you more years than not. But you still watch what happens in this upcoming NFL draft, how the narrative flips in Utah's favor, okay? I will be driving that boat, so I can tell you that when we get to February, March, April on the show, the pre-draft process, the mock drafts, we're having guests on to talk about these things. Guess what we're talking about, James? We're talking about, hey, BYU had a great year. Who's getting drafted, though? Who's getting drafted in the first round? That stuff matters to kids. That stuff matters to the media. That stuff matters when driving a narrative about a program. And Utah football was clinging to that as like its only hope in 2024. Well, now you're a 10-win team that's about to put 2 first-round draft picks into the NFL.
And arguably, what, the second most important position in football? Your tackles?
The money
right?
says that is the second most important. You could make the argument that pass rusher is elevated to that, right? But it's a great point. What is all the money spent on in the NFL right now? And in college football, by extension, it's quarterbacks, offensive tackles, pass rushers, and in the NFL, there's, big-time wide receivers now. There's big-time corners right now. It's people in the passing game, and tackles mostly are valued for their pass protection. So,
those are the guys getting drafted number 1 overall besides quarterbacks, too, usually. They're guys at that position. So, I'm just backing up what you said. That's huge for Utah.
In digesting the season, and it's not all the way over yet, but this week is going to be so important to know how much consistency either remains or gets interrupted at the University of Utah. The ship right now is sailing smoothly. It's not winning the America's Cup like you wanted it to, but it's not leaking. There's no tattered sails. Maybe people don't like sailboats. The prop is not bent, all right? You're not worried about running aground anywhere. This time last year, yikes. You know how hard it was to try to not just come on the air on the home of the Utes and be like, this is a disaster, and we're all going to die. It is one of the best and most important coaching jobs that Kyle Whittingham has ever done. Even with everything I hated about how he handled the BYU game, this season is one of the best years that he's coached. Because it was so critically important that he right the ship, that they right the ship. And that's exactly what happened. All right, got to take a break. Man, I have abused the clock today, and I promised myself I wouldn't do it, but maybe that'll be a New Year's resolution. I don't know. Sean O'Connell Show continues on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, proud part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network. We didn't. I missed an opportunity to point this out about the LSU and Ole Miss situation, which is just hilarious. James, I'm sure you saw this. Most of you who covered this or were watching the coverage of this at least probably also saw that Jimmy Sexton, the agent for Lane Kiffin, has once again just knocked this thing out of the park. In order to get Lane Kiffin to come to LSU now, LSU has agreed to pay the performance incentives of Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss contract, which means that if Lane's Ole Miss team that he just left wins a college football playoff game, he gets a bonus from LSU. If they win the national championship, he has $1 million bonus at Ole Miss for winning a national championship. LSU has agreed to pay that if Ole Miss wins the national championship without Lane Kiffin. So there's a world in which Lane Kiffin gets $1 million for not coaching a team to a national championship. Because that's how good his agent is.
Oh my gosh.
Can you?
I think we both need to take a shower after this show. Like this is disgusting.
So Lane Kiffin is not only rooting for his Ole Miss team that he's abandoning, that he's leaving to go to LSU. He's not only rooting for them to win the national championship without him because that's the right thing to do and because he cares about the assistant coaches who remain and he cares about the kids and all that stuff, but because he himself will benefit financially from it, not from his previous employer, but from his new employer. LSU had to agree to say, yeah, we get it. You're sacrificing the potential for these bonuses. We'll pay you the bonuses if they win. That's so good.
Gosh. And good for Ole Miss, by the way, for not honoring those. They themselves not honoring those bonuses.
Well, yeah, they're just like, you left. And by the way, the buyout on this was pretty minimal. I think it was $4 million for LSU, which, yikes. It's a lot of money, and I feel gross saying that's not a lot of money. But
comparatively, it's
low. And this is what happens when you fire someone. That's different than when another team hires you away, right? Your buyout with the school is not the same as your full contract with the school. So everyone has a buyout on their deal. The buyout is not the full value of the contract, which is why for LSU, again, who's front of mind in college football right now, for LSU, if Brian Kelly got hired away by somebody else, that's great for them. Because that school has to pay them, or that NFL team, whatever, has to pay them a buyout. Has to pay the $7 million or whatever it is. When you fire a guy, you have to pay the rest of the contract out. In Brian Kelly's case, that was $54 million. And here's another fun thing. This week specifically, guess how many head coaches LSU is still paying?
Let's see. Let me see if I can name them. Coach O.
Yep, he gets his last payment this month.
And obviously Brian Kelly.
Yes.
Is there another one?
Well, Lane Kiffin.
Oh, yeah, and Lane.
He's our new guy. So, again, after the governor said, we ain't letting this Woodward guy do it, he's inept, and we're not paying a crazy contract like that again. They are currently paying, LSU is currently on the hook for the final payment of Ed Orgeron's buyout, which is $400,000 or something insane.
Go Tigers.
Which is why he has been living right. He's been having so much fun. Anytime you see Ed Orgeron, he's doing an interview. He's looking super, super tan. He's been on a boat somewhere. That's because he's been making like $450,000 a month from LSU since they fired him.
Yeah, I mean, what hasn't all been good for him since he lost his job. He did have the divorce, but besides that, it's been pretty good.
So I guess he's been getting $225,000 a month because probably half of that goes to his.
Yeah,
but. So Ed Orgeron, they're paying him. They're paying Brian Kelly. And by the way, over the weekend, after we signed off pre-Thanksgiving, it was determined LSU was like, we're going to abandon the legal battle. We're not doing this thing.
Yeah, thank goodness.
So they sent written notice to Brian Kelly that he had been terminated without cause, admitting like, yeah, there's no chance we're going to win this.
We were full of it when we said we were trying to challenge that.
We should not have even pretended we were going to win that case. So they didn't.
Speaking of the coaching carousel, I told you UCLA had narrowed their search down to Bob Chesney. I butchered his last name. Bob Chesney, James Madison's head coach. Pete Thamel is now reporting he's expected to sign a 5-year deal with UCLA.
All right.
So it seems to be pretty finalized.
So Kenny Chesney goes from country music.
His brother Bob.
Good for Bob Chesney, and good for UCLA, and I guess good for Utah, because a guy like this is a lot less likely to have relationships and contacts on a Utah staff that might be able to pick and pull, because right now Big Ten assistant coaching salaries are a little bit better than Big 12 assistant coaching salaries. So my concern now that the ship has been righted for Utah, that we're smooth sailing, 10 wins, no stormy seas ahead that I can foresee, is that whatever decision is made by Kyle Whittingham, and I've been very clear what I think is going to happen, that the changeover, the transfer of power allows for some phone calls to be made, some agent discussions to be had, because Morgan's going to have to decide who he hands the defensive reins to. Even if he decides to keep calling the defensive plays, he's going to have to name a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, this isn't the Bill Belichick Patriots where he won't have coordinators. He's gonna have a defensive coordinator even if he calls the plays.
And we assume that that's going to be someone on the staff. We don't know how the other guys on the staff that might be candidates for that will react to having that not be them. Now, maybe you can just say, I got co-defensive coordinators, Lewis Powell and Colton Swan and Sharif Shaw, but I'm the one calling them. I don't know. I really don't know.
A little triumvirate.
I like the idea of a triumvirate. You get a lot of co-coordinators. You never get a co-coordinator. It's like, I'm the passing game coordinator. I'm the run game coordinator. I'm the trick play coordinator.
And the head coach is the play calling coordinator.
I'm the play caller, run game coordinator, passing game coordinator, trick play coordinator, timeout coordinator. Just you're handing out coordinator titles. Let's go. We'll be talking about this all week. Final break, and we're going to give away some tickets in our next segment. I got to come up with a second trivia question. Oh, golly. Oh, goodness. Evanescence, is that who we're?
That's right.
Oh, my gosh. They're coming July 25th to the Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater. 2 tickets to Evanescence next on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Welcome back to the Sean O'Connell Show. Evanescence tickets to give away. Wake me up inside. Utah First Credit Union, July 25th. If you could tell me, by the way, credit to all of you who got the first trivia question of the day on Utah's leading tackler, not someone that we had on the bingo board or whatever the correct term is there in most cases. How about this? Who scored the most touchdowns for Utah this year? Any offensive player who led the Utah in touchdowns scored? 877-353-0700. Spence Checketts in the drive coming up next. He'll walk you through the postmortem of a 10-2 regular season for the Utah Utes. Hey, Spence.
Such a good year, right? And unfortunately, probably nothing to show for it. Are we thinking Vegas Bowl? Are we thinking Iowa? Is that the deal?
Probably.
Illinois or something?
A little Hawkeyes action in the Vegas Bowl.
It probably is a testament to how Witt has spoiled all of us, where there's just like this, yeah, that 10-2, it's so good. It's such a
an
good
amazing season.
And you don't feel that reaction from the fan base. I do think, and look, you've been on this all year. I think we're going to hear this week that he's stepping aside, and that's it. I mean, look, he basically admitted for the first time how close he was to retiring a year ago after the Kansas win, which was, it was fine. Kansas, not a great team. They finished the season with two, fine wins over two average teams. Not going to be enough to get him into the CFP. And now it's Morgan's program, and at least that's what I'm anticipating. Do you think we're going to hear that this week?
I do think so. And I wish Kyle Whittingham would be a little bit more ceremonious about the whole thing. Because he's been here for 21 years.
Yeah.
And he deserves the statue. He deserves the praise. He deserves for us when he puts the whole thing back together and closes it out potentially with a 10-win season. He deserves the standing ovation. And he's just not that type of guy. He doesn't want that, which is weird because I'm so egotistical. That's all I want.
Well, and luckily I balance you out with my humility, which is what I try to do every day. But we talked about this prior to, was the final home game since it was the final home game. Kansas State. Yeah. We talked about this prior too. Like, but who is the person that can walk into his office? It's not Mark Harlan. It's not Taylor Randall. Maybe his wife.
It's probably his wife.
Yeah. Like, I don't know who would be able to send the message, but like, look, we know that this is how you roll. We know that there's football left to be played, but there are thousands of people in this community that are forever in debt to you for what you did to build this program up. And I know that there's a portion of the Ute fan base that's like, all right, I'm sick of good. I want great. Okay, we're a good program. Are we a great program? Okay, and how do we take that next step? That can't be spoken through the lens of what Utah football was for basically 40 or 50 years, with some exceptions here or there. I'm not saying it was dormant all the time. But there's so many people in this, in my estimation, there's so many people in this city, in this community, that would just love the opportunity to stand and cheer and clap and say thank you to Kyle, and not when he's marched out to halftime in 3 years or whatever. Yeah. Like right now, if this is the last time we see you march out of that tunnel as the coach, we want to say thank you.
Yeah, and you know what? He gets to do it his own way, as he has the whole way through, and that's fine.
Yeah,
and we'll just see how it all plays out. I'm hoping that there's less gamesmanship with the announcement than I anticipate.
Yeah.
But we'll see. A great season for Utah football.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, this championship or bust mentality that permeates any team, any program that has won a championship in the past makes it harder to appreciate. But I found myself watching the game on Friday being mad about the way they were winning instead of being happy about them winning.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's, I guess that's a symptom of the sickness in college football for me.
It is, and I often wonder how the two undefeated seasons, in 2004 and 2008, whether or not that spoiled the fan base, because those are so rare. It doesn't matter how good your team is. It doesn't matter what conference you play in. Like, an undefeated season is insanely hard to do and very rare.
Even A&M fumbled it away the final game of the year.
Right, and Utah football had 2 in 6 years, 2 in 5 years. And something that's like, oh, wait, no, that's something that we expect now. No, that's not how this works. And there's always this weird element to this sport, which we all love so much. I mean, college football, like when the season comes, when the season is upon us, we're all like amped and so juiced. From the media side, you can tell a tangible difference to the daily shows, a tangible excitement in the marketplace. And then when it exits, there's this tangible like depression around here where it's like, well, all right, the Jazz are not good. The Mammoth are still figuring it out. Like so it's such a great sport in so many ways, and Saturdays in the fall will always be that. But the way that we analyze the teams and whether or not they're good and how subjective it seems to be based off your own individual opinion as opposed to like what happens on the field, and then what it does to a fan base when you feel like you're entitled to undefeated seasons, entitled to conference championships, where it's so hard to do that year in and year out. And the highway of college football is littered with bodies of strictly average programs. And I go back to this Baylor, the week Utah played Baylor, I was listening, because the nice thing about the modern day of media, if Utah's playing Arizona or Baylor, you're like, all right, I'm going to go listen to an Arizona podcast for a minute. Let's learn about them a little bit. And the dude hosting this Baylor podcast was like, well, if Dave Aranda wins 8 games, you can't fire him. If he wins 8 games at Baylor, like you have to keep him. And I think the majority of college football programs, that's their mindset. Like, man, if we get 7 or 8 wins, if we go to a decent bowl, that's a big win.
It's like 80 programs in the country.
Exactly. And I think the biggest compliment to Kyle is that's not good enough here anymore. 2 years ago, when they won 8 games, that was potentially as good of a coaching job as he had ever done.
Yes.
Because it was a skeleton crew. And everybody was like, oh, it might be time for him to go. Why? Because he won 8 games with half of his roster? The biggest compliment to Kyle is now what we expect from this program, where a 10-2 season as a member of a P4 conference is kind of met with this like, yeah, all right, cool. It's a great year by any metric.
Spence will be doing the yeoman's work today. Flew in late.
I did. Landed late. I have an airplane question for you.
Yes.
Sean O'Connell hops on the plane, headed up to Dubai to call a fight.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this would happen to you because we know how you fly. We know the status, okay?
Yeah.
But just for hypothetically
Diamond
speaking.
medallion, if you're wondering.
No, we're aware, Sean. We're all very impressed.
I don't know if you know this.
No,
but
we're all very impressed. You're
Sorry.
a big deal.
All right.
But directly behind you is a mother with, let's say, 2 young children.
Yeah.
And the young children are either afraid of flying or they're uncomfortable, and tears are flowing for 6-7 hours.
Yeah.
How does that resonate with you?
I feel deep sympathy for the mother.
There it is. It shouldn't be hard, people. And maybe this is me, the oldest of 6, having traveled because my dad was working so much. So oftentimes it was my mother and then all of us. And we were the worst. Loud, crying, fighting. There was this one flight where my little brother fell asleep. And I took a permanent marker and drew like a huge beard on his face. And he didn't see it until he walked into the bathroom.
It's supposed to happen in frat houses, not in airplanes.
And I was so careful. He was so passed out. I was so careful. But I was able to get a good full beard. He was like 7. Walks into the bathroom. You hear this. Ah! He looked in the mirror. So it comes from a place of me experiencing being part of a chaotic family on planes where all we got was dirty looks. But nothing upsets me more than the person who's upset about the babies that are crying and are mean to the parents. I hate that.
It's the worst. It's the worst thing ever.
It is, yeah.
It says so much about you as a human.
Yes.
If you're like, a crying baby is such an inconvenience.
Yeah.
Nobody loves it.
Right.
But I promise you, it's so much worse for the parent.
That's the bottom line.
Than it is for you.
Nobody's having a worse time than the mother trying to corral the 2 kids because she's getting looks. And by the way, noise-canceling headphones these days, you can get a decent pair for like $70, dude. Like if you're flying cross-country, buy some noise-canceling headphones and relax.
They'll just give you the free ones on the plane.
Use those.
That you can plug your ears with.
Yeah.
Shout out to any parents traveling if your kids are crying and freaking out and kicking the back of my seat. I know it's not your fault. I ain't mad at you.
I'm glad we're on the same page.
Well done.
Good to see you, Sean.
Stay tuned for The Drive. Thanks for listening to the Sean O'Connell Show. We'll do it again tomorrow on ESPN.